Welcome to another episode of my podcast. Today we'll take a look at one of the most disturbing cases in France, the story of Marcel Petiot, known as the Butcher of Paris, a man who took the lives of dozens of refugees and became one of the most notorious serial killers in the country's history. Chapter 1: Childhood and the Making of a Mind. Marcel Petiot was born on January 17, 1897, in Auxerre, a quiet French town about 150 kilometers from Paris. His family belonged to the middle class. His father worked for the post office while his mother stayed at home. At first glance, it didn't seem like the kind of place where one of the darkest figures in French criminal history would emerge. Yet from early childhood, Marcel appeared different from other children. Teachers and classmates noticed his unusual intelligence. He learned quickly, remembered everything, and grasped ideas that confused others. But his brilliance came with a strange personality. He was withdrawn, eccentric, and at times aggressive. Even as a child, he had trouble following rules, stealing small things, inventing stories just to draw attention, and refusing to obey authority. His early years were also marked by the outbreak of the First World War. When it began, he was still a teenager. The constant atmosphere of fear and uncertainty left its mark on him. During his later military service, he proved to be a man capable of surviving harsh conditions, but also someone who never hesitated to twist circumstances to his own advantage. He often pretended to be ill to avoid duty, and through those experiences, he became increasingly fascinated by medicine. Marcel soon realized that education and a title could give him the respect and power he desired. While other young men dreamed of family or steady work, he looked at the world through the eyes of someone who wanted control. Already then, one of the defining traits of his character began to show: a mix of sharp intelligence and emotional detachment. From an early age, Petiot tried to appear exceptional. He loved when others looked at him with admiration. But behind the confident mask hid someone incapable of true empathy. People around him began to notice that he seemed unaffected by the pain of others, that he saw human suffering not as a reason to help, but as an opportunity to exploit. Marcel Petiot's childhood and youth weren't shaped by poverty or tragedy, but by his own nature. It was a time when the foundations were laid for the man who would one day use his intellect and the prestige of a doctor not to heal, but to deceive, manipulate, and commit acts that would horrify all of France. Chapter 2: Studies, Medicine, and the First Mistakes. After the end of the First World War, Marcel Petiot decided to pursue a career in medicine. He took advantage of the benefits granted to war veterans, which made it easier to enter university, and enrolled at the Faculty of Medicine in Paris. Although he was never known for hard work, his intelligence and quick learning set him apart. He passed his exams without much effort and, in 1921, obtained his medical degree. At that time, he appeared to be a man on the path to success. People saw him as an educated and capable doctor, confident, eloquent, and attentive to his patients. He inspired trust, which soon became one of his greatest tools. Yet even during his studies and early practice, it became clear that his fascination with medicine wasn't driven purely by the desire to help. He was intrigued by the idea of controlling the human body and mind, by the thought of having absolute power over another person. Before long, trouble followed him. He was repeatedly investigated for financial misconduct and unethical behavior. He was accused of prescribing unnecessary medication, taking payment for procedures he never performed, and even stealing from his patients' mail. But thanks to his charm and gift for manipulation, he always managed to escape any serious punishment. Authorities warned him, yet the consequences never came. Around the same time, Petiot's ambitions began to turn toward politics. He ran for mayor in the small town of Villeneuve-sur-Yonne, where he had recently settled. Locals were captivated by his energy and charisma. He was young, educated, a war veteran, a man who seemed to truly care about the community. In 1926, he was elected mayor, but his time in office revealed another side of his personality. Petiot misused public funds, enriched himself at the town's expense, and exploited his position for personal gain. Despite growing suspicions, Part of the population continued to support him. He had the ability to appear decisive and confident, traits people admired in a leader. Still, by 1931, financial irregularities and corruption scandals forced him to resign. That didn't stop him. Quite the opposite. His ambition wouldn't allow him to disappear from public life. He continued practicing medicine and soon built a reputation as a talented, though somewhat eccentric doctor. Patients appreciated that he was accessible and often treated the poor who couldn't afford other physicians. But behind that image of kindness hid a man whose view of human life was far darker than anyone imagined. His studies, early medical career, and political beginnings revealed two sides of Marcel Petiot. On one hand, an intelligent and capable man with every advantage for success. On the other, a manipulator and deceiver who saw both medicine and politics not as a calling, but as tools for his own benefit. It was only a matter of time before his hidden nature would fully come to light. Chapter 3. The Doctor in Paris in the Second World War. After leaving politics, Marcel Petiot moved to Paris. The big city offered him both anonymity and new opportunities. He opened his own medical practice and quickly gained patients, thanks to his reputation as an energetic and fearless doctor. He knew how to appear kind, even unusually compassionate. He accepted patients others refused to treat, including the poor and those living on the margins of society. This earned him sympathy, but it also helped him build the image of a man who could be completely trusted. Yet his methods were often far from ordinary. He prescribed suspiciously large amounts of medication, used his office for questionable experiments, and engaged in behavior that would have ruined any other doctor's career. But Paris at that time was a city full of struggle, and people were simply grateful to have a physician who seemed to care. Then came the Second World War, and with it, the Nazi occupation of France. Paris turned into a city of fear and scarcity. For many, daily life meant food rations, curfews, and the constant threat of arrest. And it was in this chaos that Marcel Petiot's true nature came to light. On one hand, he presented himself as a hero. He claimed to help people escape from occupied France, promising them safe passage across the border. He portrayed himself as a member of the resistance, a man risking his life to save others. He told stories of secret routes to South America, offering shelter and hope to those in danger. But behind that image hid a terrifying reality. Petiot preyed on people's fear and desperation. He promised them freedom, demanded their valuables, allegedly to pay the smugglers, and then led them to his house on Rue Le Sueur, where their trail ended forever. In wartime Paris, disappearances were easy to explain. People vanished every day, arrested by the Gestapo, deported to camps, or simply lost in the chaos of occupation. Petiot's legend as a brave resistance fighter sounded believable, and for a long time, no one suspected what truly lay beneath. The Second World War gave him the perfect cover. He could pose as a savior while exploiting the darkest chapter of European history for his own monstrous plans. It was the moment when the mask of the doctor and supposed hero became his most powerful weapon. Chapter 4. The Victims and the Modus Operandi. Marcel Petiot chose his victims carefully. He wasn't a random hunter. He was a calculating manipulator. He targeted those most vulnerable: Jews, refugees, members of the resistance, and ordinary people desperate to escape occupied France. All of them shared the same thing: despair and the hope of a new beginning. And those emotions became the very tools Petiot used to lure them into his trap. His modus operandi rarely changed. He would approach people with a story about a secret escape network capable of arranging safe passage to South America. He claimed to have contacts, guides, and the resources to make the journey possible. For his services, he demanded large sums of money and valuables, insisting they were needed to pay the smugglers. People believed him. He was a doctor, respected, calm, and trustworthy in appearance. When a victim agreed to his offer, Petiot brought them to the house on Rue Le Sueur in Paris. He told them that final preparations would take place there: vaccinations, medical checkups, and the last formalities before departure. The house became a supposed gateway to freedom, In reality, it was a door to a place from which no one ever returned. Inside, the trap was set. Petiot posed as the doctor who needed to perform medical procedures before the journey. He used injections and chemical substances, not to protect, but to end lives. Some victims met their fate directly in his office, others in the basement, where isolation and silence marked their final moments. Petiot acted with chilling precision. There were no outbursts of rage, no impulsive violence. His acts were methodical, repeated, and calculated to the smallest detail. Each victim brought him not only financial gain, but also a disturbing sense of power. When it was over, he disposed of the bodies. In the cellar, he built an improvised crematorium, using fire to destroy the remains. Other times, he used quicklime or various chemicals to erase all traces. Neighbors occasionally complained about strange smells coming from the house. But wartime Paris was full of oddities, and few dared to ask questions. It's difficult to know how many lives he claimed. Official numbers speak of several dozen, but many historians believe the true count was far higher. Petiot kept no records, and those who trusted his promises vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, rumors spread across Paris, whispers of a secret resistance network and a doctor helping people escape. The truth, however, remained hidden behind the walls of the house on Rue Le Sueur, and the longer his plan worked, the more convinced Petiot became that he was untouchable. Chapter 5. The Discovery and the Investigation. The year 1944 brought dramatic events to Paris. The city was still under German occupation, and its residents lived in constant fear of the Gestapo and informants. Amid this tense atmosphere stood the house on Rue Le Sueur, a place from which a strange, unpleasant smell often drifted. Neighbors complained about the smoke rising from his chimney, describing it as acrid, heavy, and unlike the usual scent of burning coal. Some even said it reminded them of burning flesh. At first, no one dared to investigate further. War had filled Paris with so many inexplicable horrors that people preferred to look the other way. It wasn't until the spring of 1944 that the police finally decided to act. The number of complaints had grown, and suspicion became impossible to ignore. When investigators entered the house, they stumbled upon one of the most horrifying discoveries in the history of French crime. In the basement, they found piles of ashes, fragments of human bones, and partially charred remains. Throughout the rooms lay suitcases and personal belongings, items that once belonged to those who were supposed to have escaped to safety. The discovery shocked all of Paris. Rumors spread about a secret crematorium in the heart of the city and about a doctor who pretended to be a savior, but had instead sent his clients to their deaths. Marcel Petiot, however, was nowhere to be found. As soon as the investigation began, he vanished. Some believed he had fled to Germany. Others thought he was hiding somewhere within the city itself. The police launched a massive manhunt. Posters bearing his face appeared all over Paris with the word "Wanted" printed in bold letters. Within days, everyone knew his name. Newspapers published shocking details from the House of Horrors, and people began recalling friends or relatives who had disappeared without a trace. Investigators soon uncovered that Petiot had already been investigated in the past, accused of fraud and several suspicious deaths, yet had always managed to avoid punishment. But this time, the evidence was undeniable. The house on Rue Le Sueur was not a refuge. It was a place of death and deception. All of France watched as a once respected doctor and self-proclaimed resistance hero became a fugitive and the most wanted man in the country. Chapter 6. The Trial and the Verdict. After several months on the run, Marcel Petiot was finally captured. He had disguised himself, used false names, and even claimed to be working for the French resistance. In the chaos of wartime France, he managed to stay hidden for a while, but his face had become too well known. When he was finally arrested, France exhaled in relief. The man labeled one of the worst murderers of his time was at last brought before justice. The trial began in 1946 and quickly became one of the most closely followed events in post-war France. The courtroom was filled with journalists and spectators eager to see the man whose home had turned into a private crematorium. Petiot's behavior was strange, part confident, part theatrical. He claimed his victims were actually collaborators or Nazis, trying to present himself as a patriot and a hero of the resistance. He insisted he had never killed innocent people, but rather cleansed France of its enemies. The court, however, presented evidence that shattered his story. Objects found inside the house belonged to ordinary people. Jewish families, merchants, students, and women desperate to escape the Nazi occupation. Petiot had lured them with promises of a safe passage to South America. He took their money, jewels, and valuables, and instead of freedom, they found death. The prosecution charged him with more than 20 proven murders, though the real number was likely much higher. Some estimated that the true death toll exceeded 60. The evidence discovered inside his house suggested that many of his victims were never even recorded among the official dead. Throughout the trial, Petiot often smiled, made jokes, and took notes as if the proceedings were a performance. His cold demeanor only strengthened the impression that he felt no remorse, that he enjoyed the role of master manipulator until the very end. But the jury was unmoved. After months of testimony in 1946, the court delivered its verdict. Marcel Petiot was found guilty and sentenced to death. The execution took place in May of that year, by guillotine. Paris, in a way, finally breathed again. The man who had posed as a savior but betrayed everyone who trusted him would never return. His case remained a chilling reminder that even a man in a white coat, smiling, soft-spoken, and seemingly devoted to helping others, can hide the face of a true monster. Chapter 7. Conclusion. The story of Marcel Petiot stands as one of the darkest chapters in the history of French crime. A doctor sworn to heal instead used his knowledge and authority to exploit the trust and desperation of others. He offered salvation, but delivered death. His case shattered not only faith in a single man, but also the public's confidence in the very institutions meant to protect them. It revealed that evil can wear the face of kindness, a gentle smile, a reassuring voice, and a white coat. And that even in moments when people search for their last hope, there may be someone waiting to take not only their lives, but their dignity as well. To this day, Marcel Petiot remains a symbol of betrayal, manipulation, and cruelty. A reminder of how easily a savior's mask can hide the face of a monster. If you found this story interesting, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss the next episodes. There are still dozens of dark and shocking stories waiting to be told. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you again in the next one.